If you don't know me, my name is Sandy Lowe. I'm Bold Strokes Books Senior Editor. This panel is Author Readings and Q&A, New Book, Who Dis, which is how we introduce a new character into an already established series or environment. So cool new topic. I don't think we've done one on this before, so I'm interested to see how this goes. Our lovely panelists today are Brey Willows, Anna Hartnett Reichardt, Nathan Burgoine, and DC Robeline. Hi guys, welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
No, you're welcome. Gonna be fun. I am super excited to kick off the BSB Bookathon Winter 2023 edition. How do we get to 2023 already?
It's been a whirlwind.
How did that happen? I don't know where last year went. I must have blinked and missed it. All right. I think our numbers are looking good now. Please do comment in the chat if you have something to say. And if you have questions for our panelists, pop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I'll also try to check the chat too for questions, but the Q&A box is the best place for those. All right. We are going to be also streaming to Facebook. So if you miss a couple of the sessions and you want to catch the replays, please do check out our Facebook page. And there will be a sale when I will post the link to that sale in the chat roll too. All right, I always have an opening question. So my question for our lovely panelists today is, what is the most important trait that you must decide for any character that you create? Is there something that stands above the rest? Brey, how about you?
I started doing that just today on a new book. So I think for me, it's deciding how they're going to grow and what it is that they have to change. So from kind of beginning to end, what that growth journey is. What kind of baggage they have at the beginning that we need to unpack so that they're, a little bit lighter on the other side.
I love that. So basically everything you're saying. The whole arc.
Yeah. All that like childhood angst and all of that stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. Okay. Brey has to figure out the entire arc first. That is the most important thing. That's a good answer. And I would hope that everyone
would emotional journey has to be on the page first.
Nathan, how about you? What's something you must decide first?
I'm going to give credit where it's due. Jess Wells gave a seminar I attended once, and she used the phrase "only to discover," and that has become my character benchmark. So until I know what it is the character thinks they want, and then have an idea of when they get it, only to discover that it's not right or that it's wrong for them or, it wasn't worth it or that kind of thing. So I always have that phrase tucked in the back of my head for every character, like only to discover.
I like that. So it's kind of, you start with the end point, what is it that they're going to figure out about themselves? I like that. Great answer. DC, how about you? What's a character trait or a point that you have to figure out first?
Their voice. I'm very dialogue driven, and I probably have at any given moment in my head, I've probably got 50 or 60 characters, and they're snaps of dialogue. They're little bits and pieces of conversations between characters. And if I'm starting a new character, the first thing I'm thinking is, what do they sound like? How do they talk? What is their language like? What words do they use? Because all of that leads to education, it leads to background, it leads to roots, it leads to aspirations. It's really the key to the whole person is what they talk, how they speak, and how they sound, and what they intend to say with the things that they don't say, their non-spoken language. All of that's wrapped up in the character, and that's the place where I start. My dad used to get extremely frustrated with me when I was a kid because I would often be off skylarking or not paying attention when he was confident I should have been paying attention. And he didn't realize it, and he didn't live long enough for me to tell him. But what I was doing in all that time was I was having these conversations. I was listening to these conversations. I was laying the groundwork for being an author later. And that's why they've always been character driven.
Awesome. That's a great answer. I think that's really cool too, especially in a written work, to think about what is it that your character sounds like, and all these things that maybe, you could overlook in a book, in something that's written that may not come across for everyone. So that's a really cool, I really like that example. It's something I think new and fresh and different for authors to think about. All right, Anna, how about you? Something, character trait.
I think I'm gonna say how they deal with conflict is like pretty key to the whole story. Life is happening to all of us at once and to all of the characters, but it's like how they deal in those moments of conflict that kind of makes the story unique and drives a lot of that tension and like where they choose to go with that. So I think that's a pretty big key of what I want to know while I'm going into the story, because Lord knows I don't know much else when I start.
That's so not true.
Big pantser, but I do like to know that for sure.
All right. So in fiction, as in life, we need to know how people deal with conflict before you're ready to commit to writing them, right?
Exactly.
For sure. All right. If anyone tried to type in the chat and wasn't able to, you should be able to now. I'm sorry, it's some weird setting that I had to change. So please go ahead if you want to. And we are going to start our readings, and we are going to start with Brey. If you would like to just tell everyone a little bit about who you are as an author, if they haven't met you yet or read your books, and then please start reading whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. These are always so much fun, and I love the ability to share that with people. So I'm reading from Lines of Love today, which is the third book in the Memories Muses series. These are each standalone books, and they each feature one of the 9 Greek muses who are in charge of things like love and poetry and the cosmos and all that kind of stuff. They follow on from the Afterlife Inc. trilogy, which was where the gods from all the religions came and kind of started hanging out in our world and just being like your neighbor kind of thing. So that's where this book takes place. We're a couple years on from that. And Eris is the muse of love. And she's having some issues. She is being sued by all the people who feel that if she'd only been doing her job correctly, they would have found great relationships. So this is a scene between Eris and Grace Gordon, who is her lawyer. Pizza? Eris asked, turning toward Venice Beach. My go-to, Grace said. Sorry, I've already lost my place. That didn't take long. Okay. My go-to, Grace said. They strolled along the boardwalk beneath the palm trees, the ocean crashing against the beach on one side, cafes and chic restaurants on the other. Eris breathed in deeply and felt her shoulders start to drop. It was nice that Grace allowed her to be silent, to gather her thoughts and let the agitation of the day fall behind them like so many grains of sand. By the time they'd passed the roller skaters, the palm readers, the sellers of incense, jewelry, and art, she could breathe again. When they got to Ray's Pizza, they ordered 2 giant slices each and took the heavy, greasy pile onto the beach. Grace kicked off her red heels and plopped down, only just managing to keep her pizza from hitting the sand. She laughed. I think my parents named me Grace ironically. I'm the least graceful person in the world. Eris, in contrast, managed to sit beside her easily. You seemed pretty graceful on the dance floor. And after. Grace's mischievous grin made Eris laugh. Yeah, well, it helps when you have a damn smooth partner to follow. They ate their first slices before Grace took a deep breath. So, can we talk? Do we have to? Words just mess things up. Grace snagged Eris's piece of pizza and held it away from her. You don't get this back until you agree to spill your soul. Hey, no fair. Eris leaned over to take it back, and her arm brushed against Grace's breast. Sorry, she jerked back, her arm on fire. No complaints here. Grace handed the pizza back. I'd like to know why you retired. Eris ate slowly, thinking. I stopped believing. Grace nodded. Okay, go on. How could she say it without sounding like a jaded jerk? Perhaps there wasn't any other way. As Grace said, she simply had to spill her soul. I was born to be the muse of love, to inspire people to create beautiful works, to help them express themselves to each other. From Homer to Shakespeare, I was there. Sonnet 18, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? That was me. I mean, it was William, but we spent a lot of time together, and he adored exploring the permutations of love. It was incredible, and I don't mind telling you that his sister was a wonderful lover and poet in her own right. She grinned when Grace rolled her eyes. And although marriage for love wasn't really a thing among the wealthy, regular people almost always married for love because there wasn't anything else, except maybe the number of goats or the piece of land. The emotions were real. Grace wadded up her paper, took Eris's, and clumsily got to her feet to throw them in the trash. She came back and sat closer to Eris than was probably professional, but Eris was glad for the contact. Okay, so you and Shakespeare are writing things like Romeo and Juliet while you bonk his sister in your free time. How do you go from that to retiring because you don't believe anymore? Bonk? Very erotic. I'll use it in my next poem. Eris drew hearts in the sand as she thought. In the 17 and 1800s, the Industrial Revolution happened. People were suddenly surrounding themselves with machines, trains, electricity, factories. Once it started, it exploded, taking humans into a whole new state of being. The problem with that was that it started to distance them from each other. Work hours got longer, families got more stressed, children were pressed into work they had no business doing. Surely they didn't stop loving each other. Grace dug her feet into the sand. The desire to express the way they felt didn't end. Eris stared at the ocean, remembering. Creation became less about the arts and more about advancement, about steel and making more. My sister Yuri and the goddess Minerva were run off their feet, always around to help with inventions and new concepts. But love? It was an emotion, and emotions began to be seen as weakness. She shivered and hugged herself. I felt it, kind of like a slowly receding tide. There was a little burst in the 1960s when people started talking about love and saying how important it was that we care for one another, even in the midst of another senseless war. For a second, I had hope. And then, Grace asked softly, and then we hit the electronic era, and humans separated from each other even more. The word love was used without any real meaning. People loved their phones, their computers. They loved their houses, their pools. But they stopped understanding what it really means. They stopped looking into each other's eyes so they could really see each other. Everything is passing now. The divorce rate, as you know, is more than half. More than half. People get married, then decide it's over. They walk away. And that number quadrupled when people who were supposed to love each other were forced into constant proximity with the pandemic. Love withered like grapes in a drought. So that fun section, that lighthearted section is kind of, it lets you know where our poor Eris, the muse of love, stands.
That's awesome. I love that. Is it fiction or is it cultural commentary? Because
well,
either way.
You know, that's the beautiful thing about fantasy is you weave in the cultural commentary so people can play with it if they want to.
For sure. But we're gonna have to talk about bonk later because
yes, bonk.
That one needs a discussion, I think. All right. So, quick question for you. Tell us a little bit more about Eris, so that readers can kind of get to know her. Tell us, whatever you want people to know about who she is.
So when we meet Eris, she's a DJ. She owns her own nightclub in Malibu. She's long been retired. She's she's butch. She's big biker boots. She rides a Harley, and she has a really good group of kind of butch friends, and they go out on motorcycle rides together. And Prometheus the Titan god, one of the original Titan gods, who's about kind of 12 to 15 feet tall with a giant white beard. He rides with them as well. So that's something to see on the freeway.
Not intimidating at all.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. So she likes women and drinking and kind of a solitary space, as well as her kind of overrun space. But once she starts to get sued and things get really, really out of hand, she has to retreat and do a lot of soul searching, hence the baggage.
I love it. Okay, women, drinking, baggage. This book has everything.
It's all there.
I put the link in the chat roll if anyone wants to check it out. And you can also get the 2 previous books in this series, Song of Serenity and Vision of Virtue, which Brey conveniently put behind her for me to read out. You can grab those on sale if you just click the link in the chat. Thank you so much, Brey.
Thanks.
Next up, we have DC Robeline.
Thank you.
Hello, hello, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about you if they haven't met you yet, and then you can start your reading whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm a former journalist and accidental novelist. The series I'm reading from today is the book I'm reading from is Manny Porter and the Yuletide Murder. It's my second novel in a series called the Tinker Creek series. The series is set in a community I've created along the South Georgia coast. And I write about a world where lesbian and gay and LGBTQ characters are able to live and do live well-rounded and full lives of adventure and suspense and love without apology. So in this reading tonight, I'm reading a section where my protagonist hero, Manny Porter, who's a reporter, who's trying to keep a young man who's been accused of a murder he did not commit from being railroaded for that murder. He's been contacted by a source who might know something about the case. The source has asked him to please meet him at this community's local skate park on a Sunday in December. The whole book takes place in the roughly 30 days between Thanksgiving and about a week after Christmas. So here we go. Manny Porter and the Yuletide Murder. I arrived at 2:40 and gradually made my way around the edges of the park to the gazebo. Everyone using the space appeared to have been skaters, from grade school to college aged, with significantly more boys than girls. No one looked sinister, dangerous, or adult for that matter. I found a seat about halfway up the bleachers next to the gazebo and waited to see what would happen. After about 5 minutes, a slim teen who had been sitting by himself on the edge of the half pipe got up, popped his board, and executed a perfect ride down out of the obstacle. Then, while seeming not to be aware of me at all, he moved through the challenges until he reached the bleachers, danced off the board, and climbed up to sit beside me. Jose Porter, he asked. If you're Rico. Cool, he said, offering me his right fist to bump. I bumped back. Does Rico have a last name? Just Rico for now. You're not a cop. You did your homework. Yeah, well, it wasn't hard. This is your meeting. Why am I here? I wanted to talk about skating, Christmas, why you got track marks down your left arm. His body tensed. Hey man, I don't use. But you did. I grabbed the arm to look at the marks more closely. 2 or 3 years ago. Get off me, he said furiously. I'm clean for more than 2 years. Congratulations, I replied a bit more gently. I know that took something to do. Yeah, well, you don't have to be such a prick. Nico. I wanted to talk about Nico. Or Dr. Nicolaides, probably to you. What about him? I knew him. Knew him how? I just knew him, that's all. Sorry, I need more than that. Why would an award-winning researcher at one of the hottest companies in the country want with a 14-year-old skate punk? I started gathering myself to leave. He was one of my clients, he said in a loud voice. I stopped getting up. One of your clients, how? How do you think? Gradually, in fits and starts over the next hour, Jaime Ricky Pilato told me about Nico, the man who arrived at his room in the boarding house cum brothel at least once and sometimes twice or 3 times a week for almost a year. He came for sex, of course, but gradually to hang out and watch movies on Rico's small television, share a takeout pizza, or merely to talk. Eduardo always tells us we can't get attached, but I did, Rico admitted. In a lot of ways, Nico was my first real boyfriend, even if he was paying me for my time. Who's Eduardo? My landlord, the guy who runs the house and sets the rules. They had met at a Christmas party around this time last year, Rico told me. Eduardo regularly threw at least 2 or 3 social events per week, where potential clients met the residents and arranged rendezvous in the boys' rooms later. Rico first saw Nicolaides at one of these on a Thursday night, but since the researcher did not approach him or seek out Eduardo, Rico thought he wasn't interested. But Nicolaides came back the next night and happened to catch him coming out of the hall bathroom under one of Eduardo's extravagant displays of mistletoe. To his surprise, Nicolaides pressed him for a kiss. He agreed and told me the man's soulful smooch changed everything. It was amazing, to tell the truth, Rico said. I hadn't been kissed, really kissed, hardly at all in my whole life. And that one from Nico was like he opened up his soul and poured it into me. As soon as they came up for air, Rico took him by the hand to go find Eduardo and let Nico pay the fee. He remembered Nico paid for the whole night, a figure totaling hundreds of dollars. We were just so into it, he recalled. We didn't even have sex until like 4 a.m. We were talking and laughing so much. Gradually, Rico became aware that he had begun to think of their association as a relationship, albeit not always a smooth one. Overall, he was pretty cool, but I can't lie. He used to like it a little rough. Not like rough enough to really hurt me, but slaps and dirty names and hearing me moan and shit. I mean, there started to be a bit of anger for it in it for him sometimes. Afterwards, he'd be all sorry and sort of sad, really. And then he would be generous the next time I saw him. When did you see him last? Like 5 or 6 days before I found out he was killed, Rico said. He came around, but he was sad and didn't feel like doing anything but holding me and talking. I asked him like 40 times what was wrong, but all he kept saying is that the good things in his life could never remain, and we'd probably never see each other again. Of course, I thought he was just leaving me. I cried a little and begged him not to, but he said it wasn't his choice, and that if I ever read about him in the paper, I should know I would always be in his heart. A few days later, in the papers, they said he was dead. I looked up to find Rico's face pale and his dark eyes swimming in unshed tears. I didn't even have a chance to say goodbye or thank you. He really was worth a lot more than the credit he gave himself.
Wow, that was awesome. We ran the gauntlet of emotions there from
I hope
it was so
okay.
sweet, and then it was kind of sorrowful there towards the end. So that was great reading. Thank you.
Thank you for letting
All
me do
right.
it.
Sorry, I'm going to ask you the same question. Tell us about your character.
Rico is an orphan. He is both his parents were killed by a drunk driver when he was younger. He was sent to one of their parents to live, his grandparents. Unfortunately, she had a stroke about a year after his arrival, and that sent him into the foster care system, where he pretty much realized quickly he needed to be out of there, and so has been on his own independent ever since. He's a independent, entrepreneurial, very great character. He's a good sense of himself, a good sense of what his limitations are and what his needs are. And he's always thinking about, he'd be a great chess player. He's always thinking several steps ahead, several moves ahead.
I wish I had that trait.
We all do. We all do. He's key in the story because Nicolaitis gave him a bangle, a piece of jewelry that turns out later in the story to be very important. So, thank you for listening.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. All right. Next up, we have Nathan Burgoine. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Good to see you back here.
Thank you.
Okay, so tell us, no, wait, that question's for later. What am I doing? I'm confusing myself. Tell us about you. That's the question. Why don't you give everyone a little intro to who you are in case they haven't met you yet? And then you can start reading whenever you're ready.
All right. Hi, so my name is Nathan Burgoine, and the short version is I am a tall queer writer of mostly shorter queer fictions. I tend to do romance novellas. When I write novels, they go a bit more speculative fiction, but it's always queer. And if you like the themes of chosen family, then that is generally where I land myself. And this book that I'm going to read from today, this novella, Felix Navidad, is no different. And we're starting, so we have a forced proximity trope in play. So what happens is Felix is supposed to be going on to a Hawaiian vacation. However, that gets scrubbed because of weather. He tries to drive to where his flight connection would have been, and he ends up bringing along another one of the exes of one of his friends because that friend just got married, and they were at the wedding together. They only talked a little bit. They had one little dance, but anyway, they have ended up trapped in a cabin together, and they're waking up because halfway through the night the weather got really bad. They grabbed a cabin, and now they're waking up the following morning. Felix woke slowly, stretching under the blanket and realizing he'd been out cold the entire night. Light was starting to come through the windows, which meant it was probably going on 7:30, which felt delightful, slothful, and kind of vacation-y. Unfortunately, he needed to pee. He wiped at his eyes, not wanting to wake Kevin, but the pee thing wasn't getting any less urgent. He slid out from under the blanket and was as quiet as possible on the stairs. They didn't creak, and once he was on the ground floor, he grabbed a t-shirt from his bag and tiptoed around the edge of the stairs, peeking to see if Kevin was still asleep. He was, and he'd also thrown off most of the sheet and blanket overnight, which were more or less now balled around his feet in a tangle, which left Kevin's arms, shoulders, chest, and stomach fully revealed. Felix stopped, his mouth opened. Hello. Kevin was built strong, in a works hard way, not a works out way. Thick arms, wide shoulders, and his chest. Wow, the man had a nice chest, complete with dark hair and a swirling pattern that drew a darker line down the middle of his stomach. And oh, he was ogling an unconscious man. That was so icky. He slipped into the bathroom, and when he'd finished, Kevin was awake. He tugged on the gray t-shirt from the night before, too, and the word snug had never been done better justice. And he'd folded up the sheet in throws. Morning, Kevin said amiably enough, but almost bashful. I hope I didn't make too much noise. Too much noise. Felix shook his head. I slept like the dead. That seemed to surprise Kevin. Oh, good. He bobbed his head towards the bathroom, and they did a kind of shuffling dance past each other. Felix headed to the kitchen. Did you want coffee here? Sounds great. Kevin's voice was muffled by the bathroom door. Then we can head out for breakfast, maybe, before we set out? Definitely. When the kettle had boiled, he poured 2 mugs and went to the windows and opened the curtains. Oh, shit. What's wrong? Kevin came out from the small bathroom. Take a look, Felix pointed. Kevin joined him at the window. The view of the trees, path, and driveway beside cozy cedar cabin number 4 shone brightly in the morning light, sparks of sunlight seeming to burn along the edge of every surface. It could have even been pretty, except the world outside was covered in a thick layer of ice. At the door, Kevin eyed Felix. So, you don't have boots, do you? I was supposed to be in Hawaii. Felix eyed the path ahead of them to the big red building, which shone with a thick layer of smooth ice. If we get to the Jeep, I do have ice grips. Let me check how bad it is, Kevin said, taking a single careful step off the grass. I'll see how slippery. His foot went out from under him, and though he tried a valiant pinwheeling of his arms, he fell with a grunt. Felix winced. You okay? So it's very slippery, Kevin said, looking up at him with a remarkably amused smile for a man who'd fallen flat on his ass, less than a single step outside their cabin. Felix offered his hand, his own shoes still firmly planted on crunchy grass. Kevin took it and managed to get back on his feet, though with little grace. Penguin walking it is, Kevin said. Felix stepped down carefully, pausing a moment before pushing one foot forward, transferring his weight, sliding the other foot to catch up. Okay. They started waddling together, arms down, center of balance as low as possible. Frigid wind hit. Felix had made it about halfway when his left foot skidded. Shit, he tipped, spreading his arms, knowing it was pointless. But Kevin grabbed his outstretched hand, which would have been gallant if it had worked, but instead resulted in Felix falling hard onto his ass on the icy surface and pulling Kevin down right beside him. They stared at each other, and Felix saw the same I can't even look in Kevin's amazing hazel eyes he imagined was on his own. I fucking hate winter, Felix said. Really? Kevin said, lips twitching. Why? That did it. Felix broke into laughter and Kevin joined him, even as they both tried to stand up again. Kevin managed to get up, but Felix fell down. Kevin offered his hand, and Felix made it to his feet just as Kevin wobbled and tipped, taking Felix with him again. Felix tried kneeling first, fell again. Kevin started guffawing, his whole body shaking. You're not helping, Felix said. I'm sorry, Kevin gasped out, laughing even louder. After the third attempt to regain his footing had also failed, Felix sighed, one leg tucked under his butt, hands spread out to either side of him on the ice, and shook his head. So, this is my life now. I live here at Cozy Cedar Cabins forever. Stop, Kevin said, holding up one hand. Please. He had actual tears on his cheeks, and he swiped at them with one glove. Oh, fuck it. I'm just going to crawl to the Jeep, Felix said. That set Kevin off again, and he sprawled out on the ice, face up, laughing little clouds of breath into the air. He had a great laugh, sort of a barking, booming noise that didn't sting anywhere near as much as it should, given it was aimed at Felix. Once he'd covered the distance, Felix yanked on the ice-covered door of his Jeep. Without purchase, it was apparently also beyond amusing, given Kevin's renewed laughter and, oh my God, coming from behind him. Felix aimed a single-finger salute over one shoulder, even as he burst out laughing himself. Finally, he got the damn door open and crawled his way into the Jeep. The grips were in the bag he always kept, and he tugged them onto his shoes, climbing out of the Jeep triumphant. With the grips on, the ice didn't stymie him at all. He crossed the Jeep. He closed the Jeep door, carrying the other pair to Kevin, and Kevin tugged them on between hiccuping snorts of laughter. Finally, they were both on their feet. So, Felix said, once they'd gotten from the door of the big red building. He held it open for Kevin. What do you think the roads will be like? If everywhere is like this, Kevin shook his head. We're not going anywhere.
I feel like that's pretty accurate in terms of winter weather. Being from New York, I feel like I can relate so much to this.
Oh yeah, we get ice rain so much in Ottawa, and it's just once it's just there for like the rest of winter. It sometimes gets covered in snow and becomes dangerous again. It's just there.
So, is this scene based on your personal experience?
Yes, and those ice grip things are a lifesaver. I mean, especially when you've got an animal that you have to walk like 3-4 times a day. He doesn't care. He has 4 legs. He'll skid in all directions, and he stays upright. But the rest of us don't. So we.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm not sure which character you picked for this question, but tell us a little bit about them.
So I'm going to go with Felix, and I feel like I'm slightly cheating. Felix is a background character from the other 2 books, but in the other 2 books, all you really learn about him is he has a terrible sense of lack of impulse control. But it turns out that where that comes from is, he's actually a caregiver. He's a nurse practitioner. He has to be so careful with his work life and taking care of people. So his way of blowing off steam is when he's with his friends, just to do whatever he feels like. And that blew up in his face in the last book. So he's trying so hard not to be like that. And that's also not working. So this book's him trying to figure out if there is a happy medium to his life of being the guy who just tries stuff versus the guy who is never going to make a non-thought over decision again.
I love that. I think that's a great lesson for this time of year too, where New Year's resolutions, you try so hard to be like, a different version of yourself, but you're not really. And it's,
and if you make too big a change, it's doomed to failure, right? Like right. You can't just go cold turkey on something. Yeah.
For sure. I love it. Okay. Please do check out Felix and Navidad and the previous book in this series is on sale if you want to check that out too. All right. Saved Anna for last. Hey, Anna.
Hello. How's it going, everyone?
We are good. I can't believe this is, we're almost 2/3 of the way through our first panel already.
So wild. I know.
I can't believe it. All right. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about you if they haven't met you and start your reading whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'm Anna Hartnett Reichardt. I am an award-winning author with Bold Strokes Books. I live in Atlanta, and right now I work at a local distillery and have been known to sample the product just a bit here and there. I'm going to be reading from Chasing Cypress. It's out February 1st. And this scene is a meet cute scene. My main character, Maggie, is quite stubborn. She's in her junior year of college at Alder. So that's kind of the shared world that we're reading from. And meeting Olivia, who she's about to meet, is kind of the first time that she kind of feels her world break a little bit and what she expects from her world. So I'll just hop right in here. As I pull open the door, someone runs into my backpack, jabbing the tip of my water bottle into my ribs. Watch where you're going, I mumble, gripping the tender spot on my back. I turn, still holding the door half open, to find a girl I've never seen before. Or at least, I think I've never seen her before, but there's something about her that gives me the sense that I know her, or that I've known her. She takes a quick step back and touches her fingertips to her forehead, a delicate blush peeking out the neckline of her purple shirt. I'm so sorry. I thought you were moving a little faster than you were, and I looked down for a second, and now here I am, rambling the lamest of apologies. I pull my eyes from tracking the blush as it slides up her neck and into her cheeks, like a slow flow of lava. I step inside the building and nod for her to follow so we can clear the doorway. She considers me with watery blue eyes that I want to soak in, the kind of blue that may drown me. The sleepy downward pull of them matches the sinking curve of her mouth. She pushes some blonde hair out of her face with a ring-clad hand. So many rings, fat rings, skinny rings, gold rings, rings with gemstones. This girl doesn't seem to belong here. I peg her as English lit or some major like that, full of ethereal things that I can't wrap my hands around, the way I can the trunk of a tree or the handle of pruning shears. Anyway, sorry for the little collision, she says. Her gaze wanders to the brick wall that holds the portraits of all the deans and department heads over the years. Alder is really into portraits. Maybe one day I'll add to the small ranks of women's portraits on these walls, continuing the Hyde legacy, but in a slightly different way. She nods toward the wall. A little unnerving, right? Always a bunch of old guys welcoming you into every building on campus. I should probably speak at some point. And the spittoon, I say. My words coast from my mouth in a vast breath, as if I lost my ability to pump oxygen when I met this girl. I mean, there's probably not a bunch of spittoons welcoming you into the other buildings on campus. She quirks a brow, and I continue to babble because I am clearly brilliant at talking to beautiful women. Other buildings, which I assume you frequent because you don't look familiar to me. She stays quiet, brow still raised and the corner of her mouth tugging up in a half grin. Probably because she thinks I'm ridiculous. I don't even know what I'm trying to say at this point. I point over her shoulder to the notoriously disgusting water fountain in the foyer. It's not actually a real spittoon. She follows my point and finds the defunct hunk of metal, its basin plastered with a layer of black gunk, like the floor of a swamp. formed by years of ag students using it for their dip spit. The janitorial crew threw in the towel a couple of years ago and refused to continue cleaning it. Instead, they hung a sign above the fountain that reads, "This is not a spittoon," and wiped their hands of it. The sign is just ironic at this point. "Oh," she says, "so there's actually 0 spittoons." Her eyes crinkle and she chuckles under her breath, at me, I'm sure. I exhale and smile, relaxing into the interaction. "Well, when you say it like that, it's way less exciting." She nods and captures a bit of lip under her teeth, and a speck of her baby pink lipstick clings to the white of her enamel. "I want to know this girl." "I'm Maggie Hyde," I say. Her eyes dart back to the wall of portraits, surely finding my grandfather's and his nameplate, Wesley Hyde. Her lips part, and she directs her pouty eyes back at me. I catch her looking me up and down and feel an instant tug in my gut, a tug that pulls me a step closer. She holds out her hand. "All right, Maggie Hyde. I'm Olivia Cypress." I take her hand and hold her gaze, soaking in every moment of being connected to Olivia Cypress. "Your name," I start, but I lose the nerve to finish telling her how beautiful it is, how lucky she is to be named after such a spectacular tree. "Your name," she counters, and makes a show of looking me up and down. "Maggie Hyde." I nod, wondering if she's going to continue with her thought or leave me hanging like I just did to her. She sighs. "Well, I should really get to class. Nice to meet you, Maggie." The abrupt end to our conversation disappoints me, but I suppose she's right. Class is about to begin. "Nice to meet you too," I say. She walks down the hall, throwing me a smile over her shoulder as she disappears into the flow of students, and I kick myself for not asking her number. All right.
Oh, I love that. What a cute, meet cute. All right, why don't you tell us a little bit? I'm excited to see which of these characters you're going to pick. Tell us a little bit about them.
Okay, yeah, well, I mean, Maggie is the main character, so I'll start with her. Well, I'll just tell you about her. She is a 4th generation apple farmer in North Georgia, and her great grandfather helped to establish the ag department at Alder University. So she has a lot of stubbornness and clings to the idea of what her life will look like. Her main goal is to take over the family business, take over the orchard. And she's so focused on that I think she's kind of closed off to any other idea of what her life may look like down the road. Until she starts to see all of her friends go off and do all these adventures, and she begins to wonder if there's something more for her down the line as well.
Oh, I like that. Kind of exciting and scary at the same time.
Right? So college.
For sure. I love it.
Hi everyone, it's lovely to join you all today. This excerpt is from the 3rd book in my Rosebrook Village series, A Haven for the Wanderer. In this scene, I introduce the new character of Bronte de Lacy as she arrives in Rosebrook to begin her dream of running her own animal rescue centre. But Rosebrook has one inhabitant who immediately catches her interest. Bronte zoomed along the coastal road toward Rosebrook in her shiny forest green jeep. Such a weight had been lifted from her since she left the outskirts of London and her mother behind. Even though it was a cold and frosty day, Bronte had her window down and was singing along to her music like it was the middle of summer. The release she felt at being away from London and her overbearing mother was enormous. She came to the sign for Rosebrook and her excitement doubled. When she turned around the corner into Rosebrook, Bronte was starting a new chapter in her life. There weren't many opportunities like this for animal rehabilitators. The Rosebrook Trust was providing her with premises, a budget, and a prime location to start an animal rescue. Rosebrook was connected by road to a wide network of towns and villages in a rural area. It was a great base to start her work of not only saving animals, but educating local schools and tourist areas. She drove down past a large wooded area that she couldn't wait to explore. The first thing she would have to do would be a survey of the local flora and fauna, just to get an idea of what she might face here. Bronte slowed as she saw smoke billowing from the forested area. Unattended fires were not a good thing to see in the woods. She quickly stopped, got out of her jeep, and walked over to the edge of the woods. She couldn't see much, but heard chopping and then sawing of wood. Bronte had to satisfy her curiosity and picked her way through the undergrowth. Everything was covered in a frost, which made her journey noisy as she crunched the leaves and twigs underfoot. It was so strange to have a frost in October in the south of England. It looked like it was going to be a hard winter. As she got closer, Bronte could make out a tall, lanky but athletic figure, wearing a baseball cap back to front. She couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman at this point, given they had their back turned on her. They had a pile of wood to one side, which they were sawing, and a bag of tools to the other. As she got close enough to see better, her quarry started to take off their camouflage jacket. They must be freezing in this weather. When the jacket was removed, she saw a pair of long, sinewy arms revealed by a sleeveless t-shirt, which looked as if they could envelop every part of you. Bronte's eyes were drawn to her quarry's strong shoulders. Bronte had forgotten to breathe, and a heat seeped into her that was certainly not coming from the weather around them. It filled her body so quickly that, depending on the identity of the person in front of her, she might be questioning her sexuality. A twig cracked underfoot, and her quarry turned quickly. "Hello? Hello? Can I help?" Bronte was on her toes and ran back to her jeep. She didn't want to be caught spying on who she now knew was a woman. What had been a quest to find out if the fire in the woods was supervised had resulted in warming her own body in this cold morning. Bronte followed the directions of her sat-nav until she came to a cottage, just outside the centre of the village. Fox had shown her around the place about a month ago. It was perfect. The cottage fronted a large parcel of land, and Lady Clementine explained that it had been a small holding at one time, with goats, chickens, pigs, and a couple of cows. Plenty of room to begin her dream and hopefully make her new home. Thank you for listening, and it's been great to be with you today. Cheers.
Okay, all right. I think that's everybody. So why doesn't everybody jump back on? And we do have a few minutes for questions. If any of our attendees have a question, please pop it in the Q&A or in the chat if you want, and we'll ask them. But I will start us off. So when you're creating a character for a world that you've already established, do elements of the setting influence kind of who that character needs to be, or aspects of that character? Since your setting is kind of already in place, and then you're bringing in a character, is there something about them that kind of has to be a certain way, or does it not matter?
Well, I think especially for junior year and Maggie's family orchard is just like a 40-minute drive from the college campus. So that shared universe of Alder University throughout characters is a lot different for Maggie, because that's like her backyard. So there's a lot of that shared universe that means something different to her, since she's familiar with the campus. It's not just like an escape the way it is for Bailey freshman year, or for Andy from sophomore year. For them, it's a very different space and totally separate from their lives. But for Maggie, she walks into Hyde Hall every day for class and is constantly reminded of her legacy from her family and the pressure that she feels to become, the owner and operator of Hyde Hill Farms. So it means it's very different for her.
Yeah, that does influence her character quite a bit then.
For sure.
Because of her family legacy. I love that. Brey, are you with us?
I think, yeah, I mean, my world, the world I've created is pretty massive at this point. And if you're an immortal of any kind, there's no way it couldn't affect you, because you're part of this new world order kind of thing. So I think for all the characters who inhabit this world, they have to be aware of it, and it has to play some part in what they're going through and what they're doing. There are 9 muses. That's a lot of people who have to deal with this. So it can't always just be about that. You know, I have to make sure that they're always individual people too, who are still dealing with crap, like we did with the pandemic. Like, we were all dealing with that same global issue, but we still had lives separate from it as well, and stuff that we had to deal with. So I think that's kind of how I'm approaching it. It is part of it, but there has to be more to it.
I like that. Great answer. DC, how about you? Does the setting influence your character?
Yes, because I don't, this isn't, these aren't fantasy novels, so I don't have, I can't have immortals or anybody else cool like that. My characters have got to relate to the town and the community I've created. They've got to fit in there. So the community has to make a big difference. I deliberately chose to make this community bigger than a small town, but not as big as a big city. So I'm trying to, something along the lines of 35 to 45,000 people, enough so that there's stuff going on, but not so much that it wouldn't be possible to know different people and to recognize different people. And that kind of drives the character too, because people are more accessible. The town's leaders, for example, are not so shut off from people that they can't be reached easily. And at the same time, you still have enough anonymity so that you're not known to everybody. Yeah,
that's a great point. Nathan, will go from a big small town to a small town. Why don't you tell us, does this setting influence your characters?
It really does. And actually, this is the first time I took them away from my setting. Normally, these characters have interacted in a place called The Village, which is my fictionalized version of Ottawa's queer village. And Ottawa, it is the nation's capital. It's not Toronto, it's Ottawa. And yet it's still kind of very small town, even though it's a giant city. And so our village is very small. It's only a few blocks long. And I've idealized it to be a lot like it was when I was first coming out, as opposed to what it's like now. But the village is such a cozy, everyone will take care of you kind of place. And I realized if I wanted to have Felix very uncomfortable, and I was going to play with the forced proximity trope, the very first thing I do is take him away from his comfortable place where he knows everyone and has a whole backup of people behind him. So in this case, I would say the influence of the setting was that I took it away from him.
I like that. Awesome. Give it a twist. All right, we are almost out of time, but I do have a question from the Q&A to end things. And it is, how do you find new and interesting names for your characters? DC, how about you? How do you pick the name?
Names are the second thing after voice. Names mean an awful lot. I think that parents thinking about names for kids is one of those agonizing decisions that I've always thought about having to make myself one day if I were to have kids. And since I have godkids, I'm often involved tangentially in that process, and it's a very big deal because kids' names can be in a sort of different way. They can be kind of predictive, or not predictive is not the right word, but they can carry portents for the future. So I'll go to lists of name. For example, if my character is born in 1959, I will go look for on the web for lists of favorite baby names from 1959, and if they have anything more specific about them that I can find out, for example, if they're from a certain county or if they're from a certain ethnic or class or community, I'll even narrow it down even further, try to get to a point where I can find a name, and it's got to fit them. It's got to fit the character. I'll try it on, and if it doesn't fit, then I'm not going to use it. Keep looking.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. I love that. I love going to the list of popular names. Brey, how about you? How do you pick the name?
Well, I'm really lucky that a lot of mine exist in mythology.
Already done.
It's a really big cheat. So, I mean, that's a big part of mine. But I also, I mean, I write a lot of kind of butch femme, kind of mask femme characters. So I often will look for names that are a little more androgynous for my mask characters. A lot of my secondary romance character, so my non-immortal character, have names, first name and surname that start with the same letter. So this one is Grace Gordon. I've got others that are the same. So I try to look for that alliteration just because it makes me smile. But otherwise, I don't know. I kind of feel it out. I do a name search and see if anything grabs me. But yeah, I just cheat by using mythology.
I feel like that answer could apply to, so many authors out there. We're going to get so many more
Yeah.
books where the names already been decided. It's such an angsty process. Anna, how about you? How do you pick the names?
Oh man, I don't know if I have like a set way I go about it. Sometimes they just pop into my head. I think I got into the habit of names ending in like E, like Bailey, Andy, and Maggie. So I was lucky for senior year that Emma had already been established and does not sound like those names. So
that's an interesting kind of unconscious thing. I wonder.
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to stop this.
Awesome. And Nathan, how about you? How do you choose the name?
I'm going to admit this probably makes me a terrible writer. I use square brackets around the word like hero or love interest or some word, and then when I finally come up with a name, I do a find replace. So I almost never have a name while I'm writing. It takes me forever.
Wow.
Yeah, Felix is one of the only times I did, and that's because the punny title had already occurred to me. So Felix Navidad, that was always going to be the fourth book, the finish off the quartet. So I knew his name from step one, but all of the other characters were not named when I wrote the stories. I put them in later.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Gives me so much anxiety, Nathan.
All the other authors are like, I could never do that.
Me too. Yeah, that would be rough.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for your awesome readings. Please do check out those books and the sale books, which are in the chat roll, and join us for the very next panel in 5 minutes. Stuck with you about the forced proximity trope, and we will see you there.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.